I left the cult I was involved with a long time ago. However, its teachings still stay with me always. I've been a member here for quite some time, lurking in the shadows, reading and finding comfort in your experiences as they relate to my own. Even if I've never commented or messaged you personally, I felt a strong kinship here with you. I've seen many inspiring things on this forum, and have decided that now is the time for me to share my own experience, with hope it can inspire others. Before I begin, it is important to remember that perception is reality. How you are raised shapes so much of who you are, and the way you view the world. Seeing as this is a forum for people like me, I may not need to explain that. However, I am very used to explaining it to outsiders, and it is a good reminder to us all. You never know what someone else has gone through. I won't bore you with my entire childhood, but instead will impart to you the events that led me to leaving my village and brought me here. The events that reshaped my beliefs and made me who I am today. I'm leaving for a trip tomorrow night and will attempt to get everything out to you before I do. If not tonight, then tomorrow morning, so please be patient if I cannot get through the full story all at once. Before I begin, I just want to make clear to you all this simple message. You can leave, you can change, you can be your best self. My name is Vilena, and this is my story. Part 1. As the willows whispered wildly, I passed under and through them. With their many fingers passing over me, they brought an already steady girlish giggle to a hearty laugh. I knew that my sisters were not far behind, but as sure as a siren's call, they could always find me from my laughter. I traveled through the far meadows to the edge of the marsh. I rolled down the ocean of tall grasses and stopped face up at the bank, looking skyward and feeling the warm winds whip against my cheek. I lounged, daydreaming up at the clouds. My dreams, much like the rest of my childhood, had always been so calm and comforting. They were so vibrant in their peace and serenity that at times I longed to sleep, to rejoin that otherworldly place and its many dreamscapes. I had often thought about it before, and have often since. How fascinating it is that in dreams you do not necessarily see things. It is more a feeling you get from your dream, and your mind simply generates images to match. You get the feeling of falling, or of something chasing you, and that gives you the images of coming closer to Earth, or of a monster. Nightmares. I did not have nightmares. Like most children, other girls in the village did have nightmares. Nightmares were explained to me, but I did not have terrors to call my own. My dreams seemed constantly filled with ethereal places of heavenly, bright, vivid visages of wanderlust brought on by a constant sense of tranquility. I had always dreamed this way, until I didn't. What's strange is that in those final weeks in the village my dreams had changed, but at the same time, they had not. Where I once dreamed of my windswept oceans of tall grasses feeding into mountains and meadows, I now saw only the same things every time I closed my eyes. I saw things I had never seen before, things that contrasted so harshly to all I had ever known. In those dreams, I saw cold, dark earth packed against the red stone walls. I saw a mother who had hair about her face. Mostly, I saw the well. Other images came and went through my dreams in those last few weeks, but the one constant was the well. A well with black, brackish waters in a dark place, always dark. The well with waters that would move up and over you as they slowly transcended upwards out of the well in small beads, sweating from the surface. I remember the feeling that these small perspirations were, at the same time, calling to me as they were comforting me. They hungered for me to touch them. In every dream I approached the well, but I never touched it or its waters. Whenever I awoke from these dreams, I remember feeling so odd, not from the dreams themselves, but from the feelings they gave to me. These things, when said out loud to Mother, should have been frightening, so foreign and dark to the only world I had ever known. And yet, somehow, I felt the same comfort as I had when traversing my normal temples of trees and green vistas. Maybe for the same reason I heard people love to watch wild horses, I loved the well dream. The thing I could not control, the thing I wanted to know more about that always evaded me. My mother did not have much to say about these dreams. She merely brushed them off and told me it was a normal part of growing older. You could always dream of the meadows. On that day, as I laid on the beach of the marshland beyond, I slipped again into that same dream, and dreamt, as I often had in those weeks. I dreamt of the well, and its waters calling out to me once more. I approached closer than I ever had before. I willed myself to reach out and touch the bubbly baubles, to run and to leap into those waters. Yet in my dream, my slow approach never faltered as I drew steadily closer to the well. I felt myself coming to a precipice, about to finally understand what it meant in some way to learn its secrets. I saw my hand climb from my side and stretch out to the surface, coming close to peering over the edge. As I reached the climax of the dream, ready to view the depths of the pool, I felt myself lurch from my slumber once more, its secrets escaping me.
"Villana, wake up!"
I jolted from the dream. My sister Blanche's pale face stared down at me with disapproving eyes. The wind carried her golden hair across her face, which she primly swept and placed neatly back in order as I sat up.
"Asleep again? Always asleep,"
she scolded.
"I was so close to knowing. I could feel it,"
I said without veiling my exasperation.
"So close to nothing,"
she chided.
"It's just a dream. We all have the dream. The mothers say we all get them as we get older."
She spoke factually and without condescension. I knew Blanche did not approve of my many trips to the forests or of my general curious and lackadaisical habits. However, being perfect as she was, it was not in her to be snide or rude. She never had shared her own feelings on the matter, or of my actions.
"Blanche is right, you know,"
said Agnes. I looked to see Agnes staring off towards the marsh with the same look of mistrust and concern she gave most things.
"We all have the dreams. Mother says even if they terrify us, there is nothing to fear,"
she continued, her head tilted as she more carefully inspected a frog hopping off into the murk with a little more disgust. Luckily for Agnes, at the moment we all turned as we heard the beginning of the call, the afternoon beginning of the chapel services, and the melodic hum traveling across the valley to all corners. Blanche sighed, no doubt anxiously awaiting her eventual visit through those doors and an end to the longing for the communion with him she had long been promised. She stared off in the direction of the village, lingering just a second before regaining her composure.
"We are all far too old for this sort of prattle. Any day now we will have our descendants,"
said Blanche.
"We will meet him and see the world beyond. We are far too old to be concerned with dreams and fears. The only thing we need to be concerned with is how to best serve him in all ways and uphold the faith as Mother always says."
Placing her hands on her knees, she sat perfectly poised for a moment before softening her face with a smile and looked down to me. I was amazed at the way she harnessed the ability to preach at us, while always maintaining her calm, sweet, motherly demeanor. It was as if she was perpetually practicing the balance, to slip into the perfect motherly role she was destined for. If nothing else could be said, we could all know that Blanche wanted nothing more than to be a mother herself and raise a daughter of her own. She saw me staring up at her, pondering the thought while laying lazily in the sand. I'm sure I had a look of indifference to the sermon. Mother or not, she looked at me, rolling her eyes as she spoke.
"Come now, let's get back before service finishes to help with the end of day chores."
Standing, she held out her hand to me. It was my turn to roll my eyes as I took her hand and she helped me to my feet. Her face turned to confusion as our eyes met, and she looked down. She turned my hand over, and I saw her eyes widen. I looked down to see what alarmed her. I took in the sight of my own palm. There was dried blood mixed with the sand sticking to a fresh cut. Before I could even react, she was dragging me to the water's edge. She began vigorously rinsing my hand in the cold, murky waters. Agnes yelped at the sight.
You can't do that. You can't do that. We don't touch the marsh. We don't touch the marsh, you know that. We do not touch the marsh."
Agnes was working herself into a frenzy. Blanche's eyes were wide with panic. However, her voice was still as the waters had been before our interruption.
"We have to clean it. Maybe if we clean it, there won't be a cut. Maybe you just put your hand in something,"
she said. Frantically, she went on waving my hand in the waters. I already knew she was wrong. I must have gotten cut while rolling down the bank, but even now I don't remember feeling when it happened. I do, however, remember the sting I felt as the waters of the marsh entered my hand. These were not the tranquil calling waters of the well. These were fresh embers. The burning felt from cold liquid sent a small prickle up my wrist, and I pulled away from her.
"Let me see it,"
she called as I walked back up the bank.
"The water, the boundaries. You both know the rules. The marsh and the valley apex, it is forbidden. You both know. You know this."
Agnes was spiraling, dwindling out. She knelt on the ground. She still had not moved an inch closer to the marsh or toward us. Dejectedly, she repeatedly whispered as she stared to the ground.
"You know. You know."
The gash was a couple inches across my palm. Given it had some time since it happened, with Blanche's cleaning, it wasn't even bleeding anymore.
"Let me see it," I said.
Came Blanche, grasping for my hand once more. I pulled away again to face her.
"I am fine. It's fine." "It's not fine, Vilena. You know it's not fine. The descent—" "It is fine,"
I yelled, taking a breath. I straightened.
"You sound like her."
I pointed at Agnes, who sat still, mumbling, now too low to hear.
"She is right,"
screamed Blanche emphatically, finally losing the cool poise of the perfect promise child.
"I know she's right, and so do you. We don't touch the marsh or go beyond the boundary of the valley's apex. Exiting or going beyond the boundaries where descendance is forbidden. We all know this. You also cannot damage yourself. I only want to help you. We need to find a way to fix this, to hide it if we must."
There was a part of me that was touched by her act to help save me. At the same time, I thought about how much of that may be self-preservation. We were meant to be three pure sisters descending as a trio, as he wished. My eyes narrowed.
"This is hardly my first scrape, let alone on my hands."
I pulled up my skirts to show the pale lines and years of healed damage. My arms were much the same. I had been lucky that my hands had never seemed to be harmed, added to the fact that injuries were easily concealed in a world where Mother did not scan over every inch of you. We all wore the white linens from wrist to ankle. People were more inclined to believe you just caught your dress on a snag than you had been injured, so long as you cleaned the fabric well before arriving back home. I had become excellent at cleaning and mending by this point. This also wasn't my first time in the marsh. I'd spent my clandestine afternoon wading through the wetlands and sunbathing on the further bank when I knew no one was looking for me. I treasured my stolen afternoons while Blanche devoted more time to housework and Agnes to fetching up her mother's skirts. However, I chose not kick that hornet's nest.
"I just don't see why he would care at all about a few scrapes over the years. Blanche, why would he care?"
Blanche's mouth dropped.
"We are all meant to come to him as pure as we were born. That is his will. How could you be so careless with all of our futures?"
She said flatly.
"Because it doesn't matter."
You would think my words had been a knife to her belly.
"These rules, they're just words. I did worry once about the first small nick I received. Then nothing happened. As I grew older, I realized no one checks me. No one cares. It does not matter, Blanche."
I don't know if she even heard my second reply, as she still seemed to be recovering from the first time I told her it did not matter.
"What of the mother's cuts? What of their hands? He seems fine with that."
She swallowed back whatever disgust she had with my admissions and admonishments.
"I sincerely hope you're right, Vilena. I hope you don't come to regret this when you meet him. I hope we all don't come to regret it,"
she said, choosing to ignore my comments about the mother's hands. We all knew not to speak of them. She took a breath, and then I saw something change in her for a moment. Something past the preachy perfect sister I had always known. Her eyes, red and hurt.
"I do wish you would have told me. I would have told you."
As quickly as the hurt had shown, it was gone. She dusted off her dress and looked at Agnes. She spoke kind and stern as always, ever the mother again.
"Come now, Agnes. You will be okay. One way or another, we must not speak of this. What is done is done. We have not done wrong and have to pray. He will know our piety above all when we are weighed and judged by him. In the end, all are to serve his will, not our own."
The last jab she threw hit home at that moment. She knew it would sting, as those words were not just spoken out of anger. The words were my mother's words, spoken to me many times through the years. No matter how many times I stayed the path, they had not stopped me from myself. Hearing my mother's own counsel, I wasn't just letting him down, I was letting Mother down. Blanche walked up and over the bank, holding Agnes's hand. They headed back to the forest, guided by the rising, rhythmic hum of his call. They were easy words for Blanche to say as an attempt to hurt me, but what did she know? She had never known anything beyond her teachings. She had never felt the call of the wind as I had, never felt the pull from the peaks around us. Blanche had never longed for more than she was allowed. She never hoped for more. Strengthened in my resolve, I picked myself up and made haste, determined to catch up with my sisters on the path back to the village. I caught up to them at the foot of the forest that acted as a barrier to the meadows. We did not talk of my hand or of the marsh again. As we wound through the path, we talked of chores. As always, I found it difficult to focus on turning in the animals, washing, candle lighting, dinner preparation, etc. I did my best to act excited to gather the eggs and clean our chicken coop, though I hated the thought. The hens always pecked at me as I nimbly inspected their nests for eggs, not to mention the feeling of fear I felt at the thought of running into Stosh. I didn't have anything that made me feel fear like the other girls did from their dreams, but if I did have nightmares, it would have surely been from that rooster. I shook off the thought and put on a smile as we weaved through the woods. At last we reached the point of the forest had begun to thin, the trees making way for grasses, and then nothing but dirt with pink and white petals. The apex of the valley was marked all around us by large, flowering dogwood. In the spring each year they started to drop their blossoms. The petals rode the wind to bless us with their spectacle each year, a welcome reminder of just how much I loved home. If the wild were the waves of my daydreams, then the village was my port, a place to always return, rest, and repeat. For some reason, the grass and forest refused to overtake the village. I never saw anyone have to clear or remove the woods to make way for new homes or pens. However, the petals never seemed to care and always blessed us with their beauty. A light dusting always covered the ground through summer, offering a carpet of color to brighten the many dirt pathways that thatched rooftops of the hundreds of small dwellings within the village. As we crossed the threshold of the village, we saw the other girls already hurrying about their nightly chores. We wound through the homes and passed by Korea, Raina, and Gabriel. Raina and Blanche had a long-standing unspoken feud, the most awkward standoff that I had ever seen. It was a battle for supremacy, to determine who could be more ideal. It was odd, because they did not openly dislike each other. We all walked the same path in opposite directions. 2 sets of 3 sisters. We met abruptly, staring at one another. We let the 2 saintly Sallys do the talking.
Blanche,
said Raina, bobbing her head slowly in acknowledgement.
Raina,
said Blanche, mimicking her to perfection. The 2 perfects stood at attention, mirroring each other in every way down to their golden hair and clasped hands at their navels.
We are off to prepare our mother's dinner before we receive his word,
said Raina.
We are off to do much the same, except we also plan to bed the animals and get a head start on tomorrow's chores. Sorry, we can't stay to chat. We had better hurry off. Mustn't waste the remainder of the chapel services. As he wills, we look to the future.
I looked at Blanche with a groan. We never discussed getting a head start on tomorrow's work. I, for one, would not have been in favor, but I did my best to say nothing. I didn't need any more sermons tonight. Blanche's comment made Raina's eye twitch ever so slightly, interrupting the staring contest, and like that, it was over.
May your descent come soon, and may you all be found worthy,
they both said in unison. The 3 girls parted way for us, and we walked past them, nodding to each other as we did. I picked up my skirts as Blanche quickened her pace. She strode with her long legs, and the harmony of quick, deliberate motion, coupled with upright rigidness, gave her a weightless quality. Floating, she moved ahead of us with a grace we could not match. Agnes seemed always ready for the way that Blanche moved with purpose throughout the village. Trusting Blanche to be her eyes, she kept hers to the ground, looking for the imperceivable threats looming to make her take a tumble as she flew.
I can't stand that girl,
I breathed as soon as we turned a corner.
You ought not to speak like that about anyone, Vilena,
Blanche said.
I know you hate her too. All of her comments about hoping we descend soon, she might as well just say she wants to be rid of us already. It's just a nice thing to say,
said Agnes with a sigh.
I see what she was really saying, and you both know it's true.
I spat at the ground. I also couldn't afford to look up at this point, with this pace.
I, for one, am not trying to say that I hope they descend soon to be rid of her. It is simply the proper thing to say,
said Blanche as she came to a stop. Agnes and I almost toppled as we slid to a halt and bumped into one another. Looking up, I saw why Blanche had stopped. We were at the point in our route that took us closest to the chapel. I could see the plainly colored white wood boards that made up its walls, otherwise unadorned. My eyes traveled over the great double doors beyond the stairs that Blanche daydreamed of climbing one day. The doors were bathed in a green light, the only such light in all of the village. When I thought about this building, I really only had 3 questions. What made that green light? What was beyond the doors that made the chapel forbidden to girls and not mothers? I pondered the 3rd question as my eyes raced to look at the chimney above the steepled roof. There was the same steady stream of smoke rising from the chimney that never seemed to cease no matter the time of day or the weather. Blanche turned back to me.
I'm not trying to say that I hope she descends soon to be rid of her.
He repeated.
I do hope she descends soon, just not before me.
She smiled, a smile that touched her eyes before redoubling the mad pace from before. Agnes and I sighed and took off at a run after her. She may have been able to keep that pace without running or looking foolish, but I am sure Agnes and I looked like idiots. We came to our home at last. Without speaking, we all went our separate ways and made for the chores previously discussed. Agnes broke for the washing and Blanche for the cooking. I ran straight for the hen pen, but as soon as I was around the back of the house, I stopped running and took in a deep breath. Sitting still, tall, and proud, was Stosh. With all 2 feet of his mustard height, the rooster crowed defiantly.
His will,
I said with a sigh. I walked forward into battle. 30 minutes later, and a few additional snags in my linens, I returned to the house carrying the nightly round of eggs. I almost dropped the delivery when I saw all 3 mothers already home. Agnes sat wide-eyed in a chair near Mother Alyssa, who seemed to be speaking slowly to calm her. Blanche was hugging Mother Beatrice, she overjoyed with joyful laughter while trying her best to maintain a semblance of grace. I was confused until my own mother stood from a chair next to the door. Mother Genevieve looked at me and said what I should have known already.
My child, your time has come. Tomorrow will be the day of your descendants.
I did not react as my sisters did. Agnes responded in fear, Blanche in joy, but I did not know how to feel. I searched my thoughts and couldn't determine where I stood between the 2. The concept just seemed foreign. Sure, one day I would descend, but that was someday. Now that someday was tomorrow, I felt torn. Mother Genevieve must have seen the look of consternation. She came forward, wrapping her arms around me in an embrace. She pulled my head close to her chest, her long, stark white hair encasing me.
I am so proud of you, my daughter,
she whispered softly. Her words were a gift just for me. She gently patted my back with one hand, the other stroking my hair delicately. I pulled back just enough to look up into her wise, old eyes.
I hope I can make you proud tomorrow,
I said. I meant it. I hoped I would be able to descend. With the reality of the day settling in, I remember that my fate was not only tied to my sisters, but also to Mother. I was an extension of her, after all.
You will. I know you will,
she said with a soft, warm smile. She went to hug me again, and as she did, I saw past her. I took in the scene of my sisters' different emotional states. By now, Blanche had moved to comforting Agnes with Mother Alyssa. Mother Beatrice stood with hands on hips, a monument to rigid impatience. She looked in my direction with that same look she had given my entire life. Unbridled, exasperated contemptuousness lit in her eyes.
One of them cries, the other looks like a lost fawn,
she said, throwing her hands in the air.
We have spent their entire lives preparing them for this moment. You would think there would be more gratitude. In his name, I told you both that you have been too lax with these 2, especially this one,
she said, pointing at me. It would only serve that the mother who raised excellency would have high standards, but Mother Beatrice took this to a different plane. Needless to say, as a girl who wasn't known for following his teachings quite so strictly, I was always a target for a good sermon or condemnation.
We all handle our descendants in our own way, Beatrice,
said Genevieve.
This one hasn't handled anything ever,
she returned flatly.
I think she is handling it just fine. We never know when our day will come, or what his will is until he shows us,
my mother said, now turning and giving the same soft smile to Beatrice. I loved it when she preached lightly back to her. This wasn't just another set of sisters we watched wrapped in contended battle of devotion as before. No, this was two titans of divinity. Acting unfazed, Beatrice approached.
The trio must serve their purpose as one. If she does not do her part, this will all have been for nothing. She will be fine, as will sweet Agnes,
said Genevieve, gracing the timid girl with a nod of approval.
They will go. They will descend as he wills. One way or another, it will be done,
said Alyssa quietly as she stood. She spread the creases from her linens with far more creased and crevassed fingers. This was unlike her. Each mother had a different way of dealing with things. My own mother had a philosophy of fighting Beatrice's icy demeanor with warmth and an occasional spark of flame. Agnes's mother chose to handle her with casual nonchalance, like she did all things. More often than not, just choosing to let her cold stare drill into her uncaring face. Alyssa let out a long, deep breath and walked from the room with a slow, tired gait. She made clear she had nothing more to say or add. Her silence carried enough weight of its own. Agnes looked like a fish out of water. Looking around in dismay, she stood quickly.
Good night, sisters. Good night, mothers,
she said quickly. She almost tipped on her dress as she tried to curtsy while turning to leave in pursuit of her mother. Even Blanche's mother seemed stunned to see Alyssa partake in the discussion at all with such finality. However, that shock did not last long. She shook it off quickly and restored her fury to me.
She better make it, Genevieve. Blanche deserves better.
She fumed. She called for Blanche to accompany her and stormed off. Blanche hurried to follow, but not before giving me an apologetic look.
Good night, sister. Good night, Mother Genevieve. Thank you for all you have done for me, for all of us,
she said. I could tell she was still overjoyed, and despite the heated exchange, she still couldn't set aside her own excitement for the next day's events. She curtsied her respect and quickly pattered off to follow her mother. We took our leave then, and as usual, Mother walked me to my room. Like every other night, as I prepared my night clothes, she sat on the edge of my bed, humming quietly. Mother closed her eyes as she swayed there to that melody. It was as though she drifted off in her own special place. It is a memory I still take with me always, something to comfort me to sleep each night, even now.
Are you nervous, my child?
She asked as I slipped into bed.
I am. I just want to satisfy him,
I lied.
You will, Velena. You will. I have faith. What will happen tomorrow, Mother?
I asked. She paused, looking down at me as her lips pulled to a line. She looked even older than usual. It was as if the smile vanishing on my kindly mother's face was a sign that all of the exuberance she had left had been depleted, leaving a husk of the sweet fruit she had been.
You know I cannot tell you that,
she said. Her tender look and smile returned, but it seemed to take some effort or unknown toll from her.
What if I don't know what to do? What happens if I make a mess of things? I don't want to ruin things or to disappoint you.
She maintained her patient kindness, but I could tell somewhere behind that smile something was troubling her. She chewed my words, nodding to herself. She seemed to come to a decision.
My daughter, my lamb, I must confess that no mother has ever truly loved a daughter as I do so love you, my child.
She paused a moment. Her eyes took me in, and then looked about the room as if to just take in the moment. Seeing no one else, she took a deep breath and whispered to me. She spoke in a rush, in a tone that not even the walls were meant to hear.
Because of the depth of my love for you, Velena, I must tell you something that I should not.
My head cocked to the side, but before I could speak, Mother Genevieve leaned in closely. Even though she was whispering directly into my ear, her voice was so hushed I thought even the light wind outside would surely take the words away.
In the most difficult moments, take heed my words. Give in completely. Have faith forever, my child.
She pushed out each line quickly like a spear that attacked my mind the moment it left her and entered me. As quickly as the conspiratorial position overtook her, it seemed to pass as she pulled away and stood. She once again spoke busily of mundane nightly duties.
Are you hungry?
She said. I was still reeling, trying to understand.
I shall fetch you something small before bed.
She walked out of the room, I was left in the vacuum created in the wake of her words. Words that ran rampant through my head. Spinning, I replayed every line. In the most difficult moments, take heed my words. Give in completely. Have faith forever, my child. What made this odd was that there was nothing out of the ordinary in anything she said. Nothing made sense because it all made too much sense. She had told me these things almost daily for my entire life. I'd always been a wanderer. It was difficult for me to fall in line, difficult to conform to the dresses, chores, routines, and rituals that all the other girls seemed to have no issue adhering to. Because of this, Mother had often told me to heed her words, to give in to him, be forever in faith, and to follow his will. She had even said this in front of my sisters and the other mothers many, many times. These things were openly taught, not just to me, but to all of us during the many seasons of life. We were always meant to have faith in his teachings, even though as girls we did not yet know him. Every girl in the village knew that during difficult winters, pain, or any hardship, our mother's faith was strong. We never lost faith in them, and our mothers never lost faith in him. Why would she say such a thing, and in such a way? The question plagued me. She returned to my bed with a small portion of bread and cheese. Handing it to me, I could tell that she knew I was vexed. However, along with all other great conspirators, we held the commonality, the unspoken truth that what had been said quietly, and in such a way as to never be mentioned again. She sat, humming a version of the call at the edge of my bed while I ate. It was my turn to take in that moment now. Seeing her there, I ate slowly. I hoped she would say something else to make it all make sense, but in the end, I finished my plate and handed it back to her. She stood, kissed my forehead, and smiled at me one last time before leaving the room without another word. I laid awake, mulling the meaning of Mother's words repeatedly until his real nightly call came crashing through the village. The low thrum of the tone reverberated in the small space. The wall shook, and my bed pulsed as it lulled me to sleep. In my slumber, I floated off to be filled with more dark, moist memories. Part 2. I woke the morning of our descendants. There was a quiet that seemed to be swelling in the village, like an unseen wave about to break. I felt myself bracing as I rose from bed and walked into the common room where my sisters already waited for me. They were holding hands looking towards the open doorway leading out of the house. Both turned to look at me and smiled. Today was our day. Blanche reached out her hand, and despite the previous day, when I reached out to clasp her, she quietly closed the distance. Leaning forward, she smiled wide.
I know we don't always see eye to eye, but I want you to both know that no matter what happens, I am proud to be your sister and to descend with you. I love you both with all my heart, and I know he will too.
Blanche said as tears welled up at the corners of her eyes.
I love you too,
Said Agnes. She was of course already crying, whether from anticipation of the unknown or the speech, I will never know. My voice wavered, which genuinely shocked me. Somehow I had just never seen today as real. Now that it was here, the feelings of it seemed too big for my comprehension. I swallowed, feeling like I couldn't speak, so I didn't. Then I cried. I love you was just something you said to family. Despite having said it many times before, they were just words. Here and now, with the weight of destiny calling, I was eviscerated with emotions I could not contend with in that moment. Happy tears flowed as Blanche and Agnes pulled me in and hugged me. I realized then that I loved them both dearly. I had always seen Blanche as a golden-haired golden child, the apple of any mother's eye. I saw Agnes as a timid shadow, frightened to step away from her mother's side. If I could go back and change or do anything different that day, I would have told them both that I sincerely loved them. It was a chance I would never get back. Instead, I just held them there, and by the time I was ready to speak, I heard it. The call began. Within the village, the call was almost a roar. The humming chant emanated from the chapel in all directions, low and bellowing. It felt as though it might knock you backward. The glass of the window shook and chattered. It made my eyes flicker on the verge of fainting. My knees buckled, and I gripped Blanche for support. Her smile only grew.
It's time,
She said as she took a step forward. flanked on either side by Agnes and I. Hand in hand we moved as one, just as every other trio of sisters before us had gone, just as he willed it. We walked through the front door and turned onto the main pathway through the village. When we did, I saw them, all the other girls in their windows and doorways. Silently they loomed. Every step we took we were traced by hundreds of wide eyes, wet with wonder at our every step. They watched in anticipation. I knew because hundreds of times before I had been them. We slowly made our way down the path, met every few steps with another note of the call. I always thought since it was so loud at home, getting closer it would be deafening. However, through some miracle, the closer we got to those chapel steps, the melody seemed sharper, more defined. The song was calm and quieter. It became more than bearable. I'd always loved the call. It was a lull that reverberated from my bones down the core of me. It was my dream song and muse. Now, in this moment, I can say it was nothing short of intoxicating. I felt ready to fall into its warm embrace and never come out. I happily made the steps up the stairs, barely cognizant of my movements. My bare feet slid over the wood. They raised and fell one after another. One moment I was in the street, and the next I was at the doors of the one building in the village I was never allowed to be near. It was the one rule even I strictly followed. I could feel my sisters next to me, Blanche's hand still in mine. They were both completely silent. There were no tears, laughter, or joy. We all sat, staring at the doors. On the next pulse of the call, the doors cracked open slowly, revealing a blinding light from within. I pulled my hand free up to guard my eyes. When I lowered it, my eyes adjusted as much as they could. I saw now that the rising sun was pouring in like a dam let loose through the valley of pews. Past a large statue at the far end of the room, it flowed over every mother in the village. I thought it was unnerving to have the other girls watching, but it was nothing compared to the anxiety I now felt. Despite his call still growing ever louder in my head and in my heart, I felt small under the scrutiny of the mothers. Their long, drawn faces with their many wrinkles and pure white hair sat framing hooded eyes. They judged our every movement. Silently, they tracked us as we continued forward. No one within the chapel spoke or gave us direction. Something inside my head just kept saying the same thing in a voice unlike any I had ever heard before. "Go forth, come to me," it said. Step by step, we continued to move in unison. We crossed the threshold of the forbidden chapel and passed the pews as we approached the statue. A statue that even today I have trouble explaining. Just like my dreams, it filled me with feelings. As my feelings changed, so did it. At one moment I was giddy, a chalice filled to the cusp with joy. The statue was of a woman, but then it changed. In the changing, I was content and at peace. So much that I could have laid down and just stared at it until I let the world waste away. I would have been fine with that. In my desire for it, it now seemed to become darker, somehow. Scaled, foreign, and strange, but in no way repellent. It just was, and I was raptured that it was there at all. I wish I could have pulled my eyes from it to see the mothers. Were they looking at the statue with us? Or were they taking in the triumph of seeing us as we saw with open eyes for the first time? At that moment, I was far too busy pulling in deep breaths of the every moment spent in its presence. I don't know how long we sat gazing into the statue. It could have been seconds or maybe hours. Time did not seem to matter. All I know is that when the call stopped, the statue was still there. Now it was a simple obelisk with no adornments, standing smaller than even Agnes. This feeling was jarring. The world came crashing down around me. I felt like a child who was trying to run after spinning in circles with my eyes closed. Pulled from the dream, I fought to stay awake through the spinning. I could feel my sisters fighting with the same urge as we swayed, held up only by our combined will to remain strong in the face of such judgment. I remember thinking, is this the weighing and judgment of our souls? A test of strength to persist under such incomprehensible pressure? If only it had been. I looked at my sisters as I felt my legs start to stabilize. Blanche was somehow still smiling through a stupefied look of drunkenness. Agnes stared at the floor, though barely staying vertical by the good graces of Blanche's shoulder. If not for my weight to keep the balance between us, we surely would have toppled. Despite the call being gone now, I still heard the voice in my head repeating as before, "Go forth, come to me." I rolled the words around in my head. I could tell my sisters had heard it too. Even Agnes looked up toward the obelisk once more, and when she did, I saw her eyes turn to panic. I quickly looked back toward the statue to see what I now know to be a man, the very first man I had ever seen. Father. The man stepped out from behind the obelisk. His white robes were offset by the true white of his hair. Just as in my dreams, he had hair upon his face. His skin told a story, time cut and weathered like a canyon carved by many inlets or rivers. His age was untold. I remember thinking about how old the mothers around the village were. When I asked Mother when I would look as they did, her response was decades, tens of years until I would ever get my first wrinkle or gray hair. But if the mothers were old, then this thing in front of me was beyond my comprehension of time. He walked slowly, the apparent fragility of his age showing in the timid steps he took as he crossed the distance between us and the statue. He was tall, taller than all three of us, even Blanche, who stood half a head taller than I. Taller than our mothers, who always felt like monoliths throughout our upbringing. I gazed up at him in awe. He stood silently scanning us, and when his eyes met mine, I remember questioning my own sight. For all his aged appearance, his eyes seemed to have been stolen from a much younger man. Lightly colored greenish-blue eyes peered back at me. Spry, happy, and intelligent eyes. Not just wise, like a mother's eyes, but calculating. He was watching us, but also measuring. I was sure of it. The whole chapel hung still in that silence. The only thing I heard was the breathing of my sisters and I. I wanted to turn and look for Mother Genevieve. However, right as I made my head look away from him, he dragged me back with his breathy, flat tone that resonated all throughout the chapel. "You have been at your mother's sides for long enough. You have been brought to adulthood in solitude, safety, and purity." I felt Blanche shift uncomfortably next to me. "Much like every mother you see standing around you now, you were girls, and now you are women." He brought his hands in and touched his chest with the long nails of his fingers. "I am father. I am the only man in the village." He paused, reopening his arms and spreading them wide with his palms down. "It is my honor to be the keeper of the faith and call this chapel my home. Should you have faith in him, so too should you have faith in me as the keeper of his calling," he said. "In a village of all female inhabitants, this may seem strange, but I promise all will be explained. You will have all your questions answered through your promised descent." His eyes became softer. He held up his right hand, long fingers made longer still by splintered, discolored nails that grew out unnaturally, raised high for all to see. He held the motion before slowly bringing his pinky and thumbnails to meet in front of his palm. His other three fingers remained above the now perfect circle. "You three have come to descend, to travel." He brought the three fingers down, and through the bony circle, gripping the three tightly, he made a fist which shook at the force. "To visit the other world, to see what we have all seen. In the end, to be weighed and judged, to find where your place among us lies going forward." He stepped towards us and put his long, spindled fingers on both my shoulder and Agnes. I flinched, but it did not seem to put him off. He leaned in close, looking directly into my eyes and tilting his head back and forth. His facial hair scratched at the front of my dress. He inspected my face, and I tried my best not to move, even though under my skin my heart pounded. I felt as though all the worms of the marsh had found home within my flesh. As if noticing my unease, he lightly patted my back, his long nails sliding up and down the blade of my shoulder and occasionally catching against my linens. My skin turned to goose flesh and prickled. I felt cold. Despite considerable effort, I began to shudder. Staring back into his eyes, it felt as though his breath was a winter wind shear. His stare was a tunnel I dared not enter or turn from. I sat frozen in place, just another obelisk, spectacle for all. "What is your name, child?" he commanded kindly.
Vilina.
Vilina, he enunciated, rolling the letters around in his mouth. He flicked his tongue against his teeth as if tasting every letter. He smiled, lips pulling back to ribbons exposing the yellowed husks of what were once human teeth. The smile pulled at the corners of his eyes. What could have been joy could have also been cunning, as he whispered through a grin in a low rasp. "You will do nicely. Your mother should be proud. You will be the last to join me below." He then shifted quickly on to Blanche. Removing his hand from my shoulder, he moved to touch her. Had I not been so unsettled, I would have taken great joy in the fact that even she jumped and began to shake under his inquisition. While he looked over my sisters, I had time to gather myself. Quickly, I realized that I did have something to be happy about in the end. He had never checked my hands, never seen the many scars or history of scrapes. He was pleased. Mother had always told me that all we ever needed to do was please him. So surely, I should have been pleased. Somehow, even without any logical reason to feel otherwise, I was anything but pleased. I looked on, transfixed to the statue over Father's shoulder. It did not move as before, but I remember wishing it would. Anything to rid me of this feeling of dread. I continued staring unfocused at the statue, facing forward as he carefully caressed and studied each of their faces, investigating their every feature. As time went on, I found myself staring past the statue, to the door against the far wall. I wondered to myself what lay beyond. I saw that it was cracked open, ever so slightly. There was something within the chamber, a small bed laid plain with white sheets made up neatly and nightstand next to it. Something on the nightstand caught my eye. Shifting my weight, I leaned to one side. The change gave me just enough perspective to see an object there, roughly the size of a head of lettuce. I say roughly because the object's shape was difficult to describe. It seemed iridescent, dark, and yet indistinct. When I squinted to make out what this amorphous thing was, I felt my eyes unfocused until my head hurt, and I was made to look away at the floor. Carefully, Father inspected my sisters for a great while before lifting his palms from the sides of Agnes's face and tore his eyes from hers. "Well done, girls. Well done," he said, smiling magnanimously. He raised his head to orate the congregation once more. "I am pleased. You mothers have made him proud this day," he said as he scanned and nodded specifically to our mothers somewhere in the room. Presumably still looking at our mothers, he continued, "You have done all you can and fulfilled your promises. Now they go to make promises of their own." Still, no one else spoke or even murmured. In my peripheral, I could see the shapes of the other mothers' heads as they slowly nodded their assent. "Blanche, you shall be the first of your sisters to descend. Your value and piety is well known to me, as well as your eagerness to serve his will. He restlessly awaits you. Let us not keep him waiting." I saw her stand taller with pride. Elated, she grinned. He held out his hand to her and she accepted. Overjoyed, she stepped up next to Father and lightly moved as he did in his infirmity. As she neared the statue, I saw her look back one last time in the direction of the mothers. Blanche was happier than I had ever seen her. In that moment, as the sun came through the far window and silhouetted her in a glorious golden glow, I saw her as her mother must have seen her always. She was beautiful and perfect, not in the backhanded sense I had always thought of her before, but truly ideal. I wished then, and not for the last time, that I could be so ideal. Despite my envy of her value, we did not share the same dreams. I had never longed for this building, or for the descent as she did. However, seeing her then as the heavenly sunbeams complemented her glittering hair, she was giddy and girlish, as though all the time she had spent preparing for and wanting adulthood had found her. Now she was free to be a child, if only for a moment. I found myself basking in her triumph, the kind of triumph that only sisters can have when seeing the other accomplish their dreams. I watched as she flicked out of sight around the backside of the statue. I smiled, expecting them to pass beyond the statue and into the room beyond. As her skirts disappeared behind the stone, they never reappeared on the other side. At first I was surprised. I leaned to look around the statue. Still, I did not see them. I finally looked around to the mothers behind me. They all stood looking at the statue. I felt a small comfort knowing that although this was bizarre to me, this must have been a normal part of the ritual. Now free from father's scrutiny, I continued to scan the parish for my own mother. I found all three of our mothers standing together a few rows back from the front. I don't know if I ever would have been able to spot them in the thickets of white manis and wrinkles if Mother Beatrice had not stuck out among the rest. Blanche's normally rigid and stern mother stood staring in the direction of the statue, mesmerized like all the rest. What set her apart was that her face was beet red. Tears openly streamed the many canaled paths of her cheeks and ended as wide, damp stains wicked into the front of her dress. She looked like she was in agony, on the verge of screaming, but her mouth was clamped shut. She trembled slightly. Mucus ran from her nose, and left unattended, it dripped out of sight behind the pews below, but she never moved. She did not speak. She just sat with her eyes glued to the statue, along with every other mother. Mother Alyssa stood there next to Beatrice stoically. You could have taken the blank look from any other woman in the room and painted it over hers with no change. She seemed completely different to her own daughter's descent. Glancing across to Mother Genevieve, I hoped to see her look back at me, hoping she would show some sign of life beyond that same look of indifference. She did not. Plain, blank-faced, and soulless. She looked transfixed past us just like the rest. I watched them, observing my own mother. I was perplexed. I wish she would have looked at me, or even tended to Mother Beatrice to comfort her in some way, anything to give me a sign that the mother I knew still existed behind that stare. I was debating calling out to her, unspoken rules of silence and tradition be damned, when all the eyes in the room shifted at once. Agnes. I spun to see Father standing on the other side of the statue. After adjusting garments back into place, he raised his hand in a welcoming gesture. Blanche was nowhere to be seen. I was panicking now. With no way to know, I had to assume that this was normal to everyone else, and so it should be normal to me. I felt Agnes trembling as she stepped forward. My grip lingered on her fingers before I let her go, and watched her walk away with Father. They disappeared behind the statue. My shoulders slumped. I felt so alone despite the hundreds of eyes at my back. I held congress with my own thoughts. I attempted to think back to every teaching and sermon the mothers or Blanche had ever given me. Had they ever said anything to explain what was happening here? In the end, there was nothing I could think of. I cursed myself for my daydreaming ways, the part of me that had not cared about anything real or within the village. It all seemed so normal and rigid, while the areas outside seemed different and curious. The simple rules and rites in this place never needed to be questioned because they were just too mundane. I'd craved so deeply to be free to the wild outside that I had missed the wild within. This part of me that I had always loved had betrayed me. I tried my best to convince myself that everything was fine as the little voice inside me groaned with dreaded anticipation. My mind raced. What could I remember of his teachings? I could hear Mother's voice reminding me that in His grace we could accomplish anything. Through faith in Him, we could descend to greatness in His presence. I found myself feeling like poor Agnes. I repeated, "As well, as well, as well," under my breath as I focused on the floor. For the first time in my life, I truly hoped for it to mean something. "Vilena," came Father's deep, breathy tone. I raised my eyes up to meet his. As he had done countless times before, he raised his hand up and offered it to me. I shuddered at the thought of touching him, but I also felt the weight of the world around me to move. With one final, "As well," I stepped forward and dropped my fingers into his waiting, clammy palm. As his grip closed over mine, I looked over to my mother one last time. She stood silent and still like a gargoyle. She had not moved in all this time. I felt myself wilting as the last hope of redemption withered, and I moved to look away. As I did, for the briefest moment, I saw Mother Genevieve's eyes move to meet mine. She quickly winked, one eye flickering before she returned her stare to the statue, having never moved another muscle, like nothing ever happened. I felt Father's grip tighten as he pulled me lightly. With renewed vitality and my mother's blessing, I moved myself next to Father. We rounded the statue completely, and now I saw the stairs as Father whispered to me, "Come now, child. The well awaits." I gawked at Father. The mechanisms of my mind were slowly catching up as he guided me into the dark, descending the stairs. I soaked in the space below the chapel with a reverence. I looked over its details like a memory. Red stones bled rust-colored clay that fortified the chamber and leaked onto the dugout stone staircase. Excitement crept in and began to edge out the dread as the steps ended. The well from my dreams came into view, stepping off the stairs. Father released me to walk on my own as my feet sank into soggy mud. The muck longed to keep me and made my movements lethargic, caging my elation to a slow walk. I clomped ever closer to the culmination of my curiosity. I tread within the many footholds that crowded the space leading up to and surrounding the well. Reaching closer this fairy tale foundry, I found myself inspecting the droplets from my dreams. As they danced, I followed them with my eyes. They whirled, slowly rising through an opening in the ceiling above. I stood below in wonder, watching the dribbles expire at the exit of the chimney. Terminated by their contact with the sunlight, they puffed and winked down, drifting their essence to the wind before fading away entirely. At last, I gripped the edge of the well and stepped onto the current that served as a looking point. I leaned over the waters. Soft, wet beads respired up and out of the pool like raindrops in reverse. They lifted and floated up over my hands and face. Sweating off me, they traveled up through the opening above. Looking down, I expected to see something magical and equal in majesty to the supernatural aspect of the reversing waters. I was met only by the sight of my own face staring back at me, sharing a confused look. "Stare deep within, child," said Father. His calm, even voice echoed off of every wall, repeating multiple times throughout. I leaned closer, squinting. I tried to see beyond myself and into the depths of the pool.
"I don't see anything, Father,"
I said, my reflection mouthing the words. Not looking away from the water, I leaned down, my face almost touching nose to nose with my other self. Another long moment passed. I focused so hard that nothing else existed. I looked deep in her eyes, and then through her eyes. Within her pupils, I thought I saw something moving beneath.
"I see it."
I jumped, tried to pull back, but I was stopped an inch from the water. Father's hand was on the back of my neck. I panicked, flailing. I continued trying to push myself away from the well, away from those waters. I pushed on the ledge, fighting against his grip. He was strong, impossibly strong. His apparent frailty, made clear by his age, was nothing in the face of the strength he used to keep me there, staring at the waters of the well. I saw the girl there struggling, the man behind her holding her with one hand. His other hand braced the edge of the well, and behind them both I saw the thing in the water squirming and wriggling. "You go now to meet him, my child. Go now with my blessing, and may you find his grace." I squealed, pressing against him with all my might. His words and my cries struggled for supremacy in the chamber. When his words tapered off and my cries won out, his hand made the move. I thought his strength was superior when holding me in place, but it was nothing in the face of the force he used to push my head into and through the water's surface. The frigid waters felt like needles shot through every inch of my face. I gasped and was rewarded with a mouthful of salt water that burned as it went down my throat. Father's hands now gripped my ankles, and as I struggled more, he gave me one last push down. I was plunged deeper, fully submerged beneath the surface of the well. I saw only black below me for the briefest of seconds, but I was too concerned with breathing to consider anything else. My mind only thought of the first battle to breathe. Once I accomplished that goal, I would have the luxury to worry about what was beneath me. I immediately turned my head to the surface. Though only a few feet down, I acted on instinct, pushing my legs against the side of the well. I kicked off with all my might, launching towards the precious life-saving air beyond. I rocketed upwards. If Father was there to stop me, I hoped I could at least get a breath before I had to fight him off. That thought would never come to matter. As I saw hope in the light above, I crashed into it. Like a wall, my head hit the surface and I saw stars. Dazed, I floated there for a moment on the brink of the darkness of not only the well, but the despair of my own thoughts. Drifting within that hopelessness, I heard Mother's voice come back to me one last time.
In the most difficult moments, take heed my words. Give in completely. Have faith forever, my child.
I didn't have much choice either way, but in that moment I made that conscious choice. I now had no reason to trust Mother. I surely didn't have a reason to trust him, yet somehow I did. I surrendered myself to the waters of the well, opening my mouth and welcoming the fluid into my lungs. The liquid was alive as it ripped at my throat, burning like acid as it tore away at the tissue. I grabbed at my throat in futility as the corners of my vision slowly faded darker. I struggled less as my limbs felt sluggish and useless. My last thought, as the final bubbles of life floated away from me and easily broke through the surface, was that I finally knew the secret of the well. The darkness took me into its embrace, and my world went black. Ooh-wee. That is parts 1 and 2 of the story Sisters from the Creepypasta website. Super thanks to the author for letting me read this and also for letting me split it into a couple parts. Doing the long stories, like I mentioned a couple stories ago, is really hard. It's very challenging, and this story in total should be around 2 hours. So, yeah. I'm going to try to do the next... I should have gotten through about an hour of it, I think, with these two parts. So, I'm going to try my best to get out the next 2 parts the next time I read the story. And then I'll put together a compilation of all the 4 parts at some point. Usually I don't release those. The reason that I don't record the next 2 parts and edit them and then attach them to the first 2 parts and just post the complete version next is, in all honesty, because posting a complete version means that I get a day off, because that doesn't require any narrating or editing. I just have to post it. So pretty helpful for me. Yeah. So thank you for understanding. And if you want to wait for the full version, please go ahead, and that's okay. Totally cool. So yeah, overall a cool story. I think that the beginning of the story where the main character said, where'd she say? Yeah, please be patient if I cannot get through the full story all at once. That's how I felt when I'm reading only half of this story. So yeah, very relatable. And also this story is mostly female characters. I am a man, if you didn't know. And so I'm doing my best with all the voices. Please be a little bit kind in the comments about them. I can only do so many feminine voices, and I've been having to try to create more than I've ever done with this story. And I'm not sure how many more female characters we'll get, but I will continue my best to give all of them as unique a voice as I possibly can. If they are weird or a little distracting, sorry. I'm no Vidith22. I'm just inspired by the guy. So I can't make the amazing vocal range that he can. But yeah, thank you all so much for listening. I hope you all are enjoying the story. It's definitely very, very, very interesting. I like how esoteric it is. It has gripped me pretty hard. I am excited to get you the rest of the story. So until then, which probably won't be the next story because I don't like posting the same thing back to back. So I'll probably post another story and then I'll post the other 2 parts after that. So hopefully it should still be next week. But yeah, thank you so much for listening. I will see you in the next one. Ego Volt Anima Vestra.